Okay, let's see here. See if we're live. Okay. Anybody there? Anybody there? Let me put the link down there. We have an issue with content. They don't want us playing the 2020 videos. Seems like 2020, even though I'm not a monetized channel, and I've got the notice, legal notice, scrolling across the bottom of the screen. So we'll see if we can get this video back. But the notice says clearly, fair use. All clips are used for fair use, commentary, criticism, and educational purposes. See Hoseinzada versus Klein and Equals 3 LLC versus Jukin Media. So that's what I'll be using in my appeal to have that video put back up. In the meantime, we're going to redo this thing on Paul Skalnick. I do have other material ready in case this kind of thing happened. Fuck all you fucking lying snitches. I don't give a fuck about none of you. The story's getting out. Lying snitches and the people that foment it, the very community leaders and other business proprietors like YouTube that want to violate the very premise of honesty and integrity by striking down a non-monetized channel with a clear legal notice that this is for education and commentary criticism purposes, nothing else. It is not monetized. It is my content that I get to freely discuss from a public domain. So as I said, I have other material available. So let's get into it. Let's do the screen share on the written material so we can still discuss this stuff. And we've got Hank Hill with us. How you doing tonight, Hank?
Thanks again for having me on. Yeah, I'm interested in seeing how this goes, and I'm in agreement with you 100% so far.
Good deal. I appreciate it. Because tonight we're talking about lying snitches. And they just struck down a video that I tried to do on lying snitches with some clips from 2020. You know, the TV show 2020 that's in the public domain. And as a non-monetized channel, somebody wants to sit there and, claim a TOS because they don't know the TOS. So they lie to YouTube and say, hey, he's violating TOS. So let's take a look at James Daly and the lying snitch situation without videos and see if you can prove that I'm lying or putting out false information or using somebody else's information that they claim some monetary use for when I'm not monetized. James Daly faces execution in Florida based on testimony of serial jailhouse informant police called con man extraordinaire. Paul Skalnick is a sex offender. Okay? A sex offender. And con man whose jailhouse snitch testimony was used by Florida and Texas prosecutors to convict more than 37 defendants, including 4 who were sentenced to death. His testimony that James Daly allegedly confessed to the brutal 1985 stabbing and drowning of 14-year-old Shelley Boggio, contributed Daley's conviction and death sentence, despite the prosecution's admission that, and it goes on to say, pretty much that they knew the guy on the stand was lying. Then it goes on February 6th, a few weeks later, prosecutors, Catholic bishops, and conservative groups submit briefs asking U.S. Supreme Court to review case of James Daley. 3 groups representing prosecutors, the Catholic Church, and political conservatives have filed briefs in the U.S. Supreme Court supporting the efforts of Florida death row prisoner James Daley to obtain judicial review of his innocence claim. Daley filed a petition for certiorari on January 10th, 2020, asking the Supreme Court to hear his case, after Florida courts refused to consider evidence that another man had confessed. Interesting. Then it goes on, February 21st, Florida courts grant hearings to James Daley on innocence claim. A Florida state court judge has granted death row prisoner James Daley an evidentiary hearing on his claim that he did not commit murder, for which he was sentenced to death. They did that, and the hearing was null and void because the guy that was supposed to come forth and testify based upon an affidavit that he signed saying he would come forth and testify as to his innocence, James Daley's innocence, he then refused to testify. So they set another hearing, and he did it again, wrote another affidavit, signed it, saying he would go to court and testify. And then when he got to court, he refused to testify. And his excuse was his mother is still alive. And so he didn't want to admit in front of his mother that he was such a heinous creature. He would rather have his mother believe that he was telling the truth, that another man committed the murder. So he too himself is a liar. So let's go back to this article. And again, I'll post the link on this one in the chat. And we'll actually read it this time. And greetings, everybody. Real quick here. I urge everybody, please help out the algorithm with the like, share, and subscribe. They just struck my last video down where I was trying to do this with video from 2020. And somebody got hurt in their feelers and went and lied about me violating TOS. So they took the video down. But here I am already doing another video. So hit the like, share, and subscribe. Help that algorithm. Throw a donation down on the PayPal link if you want. There's one down there. Every little bit is appreciated. But to me, I don't give a rat's ass what anybody does. I'm going to keep speaking the truth. So let's get back to this article. The lying snitch right here. This guy right here, the lying snitch. The New York Times Magazine and ProPublica recently published an astonishing story detailing the sometimes fatal consequences of one man's decades of deceit and criminal behavior. And guys, feel free to Hank, feel free to interrupt me anytime. The link is down there for anybody that wants to jump on panel and join the discussion. We're talking about not just the lying snitch, but anybody that's willing to put up with the little lies that make you Hitler's willing executioners. The man, Paul Skalnick, is responsible for testifying in dozens of cases, leading to convictions or plea deals. And in 4 instances, his testimony helped send people to death row in Florida. Now, in these dozens of cases leading to convictions or plea deals, what they're doing is this guy will lie and say that he will get on the stand and testify that this guy told him he did it in jail. Okay, so they're taking his lying testimony as a signed confession that he did it, and saying, well, they're going to press maximum charges and bring this guy on the stand if he doesn't confess. So they offer him a plea deal to confess to something lighter. And in this guy that's doing the plea deal, in his mind, this lying snitch will get on that stand and testify and put him in jail for the max charges if he doesn't take the plea deal. So it's a massive form of manipulation that the system uses to help with their 95% conviction rate. Can you see that, Hank? You see how that works?
Yeah, that 95% at the state level and 99 or thereabouts at the federal level. I don't know anybody who's 99% accurate in their doings without using some sort of coercion.
Absolutely. Absolutely agree. And this is why I look into this stuff so deeply. 93 cases, and I was never right. That is not possible. Granted, they may have been right on certain things in many situations, but it is never clear that you are absolutely wrong in every situation, and they are right 99% of it. That's impossible. James Daly, well, that's jailhouse informant testimony, is one of the leading contributing factors of wrongful convictions in the country. Powerful statement, if people would only read it for its power. James Daly, who Skalnick claims confessed to him in 1986 while they were both held in Pinellas County Jail in Florida, was scheduled to be executed last month. Daly, who maintains his innocence, was granted a limited stay of execution in October, but remains on death row. In all these cases, Skalnick, who himself has a criminal record that includes charges of fraud, grand theft, and child sex abuse, acted as a jailhouse informant over and over again. Skalnick claimed that men had directly confessed to committing serious crimes to him while in jail together. Now, these people, when you go into these situations, these people look you up. The interns or trustees, as they call them, the jailhouse trustees, the prison trustees, they have access to certain records and they will look up your charges. And if they know you're in there for child sex abuse, they're not going to sit there and have discussions with you. They're not going to confess to committing serious crimes to you while you sit in jail together. They're going to be away from you. They're not going to discuss shit. Goes on to say, or allege that he had overheard their admissions of guilt. Often the men whom Skalnick claimed to have intimate knowledge said they had never met him nor had any significant interaction with him. The dynamics are skewed by somebody that knows better. See, I've been in prison. I've been in and out of jail. I know how to read this for what it says. It's saying right there, he's a liar. Still, Skalnick would offer this information to prosecutors and law enforcement officials who then put him on the witness stand, despite his history of fraud. They knew. They knew, they know, and they damn well know what they're doing before they do it. Skalnick did so with the expectation that he would be rewarded with leniency or reduction of his own sentence. And while those rewards were not always explicitly promised, Skalnick was rarely disappointed. This system circumvents the due process rights of the accused. Between 1981 and 1987, 6 years, Skalnick provided information to officials or testified in at least 37 cases. In 6 years, He testified in 37 cases. So in 36 or 32, 64, in 64 months, he was in that court testifying every other month. Every other month, he was in court testifying for a period of 6 years. In exchange, you got something?
Yeah, I was going to say, like, if you believe that everything that is, officially being reported, then these hardened criminals are just pouring their hearts out to this PDF file and spilling their guts. You would have to believe that.
Yeah. And that's why I pointed it out. When you go to prison as a snitch or a pedophile, you don't get no qualms. You don't get no patience. You don't get no respect. You're going to be beat. They're not going to sit down and talk to you. They're going to beat you. The Florida Times reported, in exchange, Skalnick received such benefits as having a molestation charge dismissed. So while we talk about the 14-year-old victim that was stabbed and drowned, and the old man that's sitting on death row, innocent as a victim, what about the victim of the molestation charge that he was dismissed on? What about that victim? What about that family and all the trauma they have to go through living life, knowing that this is never closed? That the man got away with it. And being granted parole halfway into a 5-year sentence, even though the Department of Corrections deemed him to be a high risk of further unlawful behavior. He was granted this parole because the guy that he was working with in these cases thought he was a good man, and he wanted him on his pocket so he could make his paycheck and put as many people behind bars, whether they were innocent or guilty or not, simply by having a tool, a lying snitch that he could put on the stand anytime to convict somebody that he never even spoke to. The practice of using and rewarding jailhouse informants is a well-established one. And like I said, in his social conditioning, where eons ago we decided that it is wrong and there are consequences for a man that gets on the stand and testifies in lies and perjury. There are consequences. Yet, the practice of using and rewarding jailhouse informants is a well-established one. It's a conditioning, not just against criminals, but against the mass public. It's conditioning people to think that these public leaders, these public service leaders are actually doing something for them when they are not. They are, in fact, harming them more than they are helping them by helping them develop this sense of comfort and convenience that somebody else would take care of their problems for them and everything's going to be okay. Let's just put a Band-Aid on it. And Skalnick is far from the only person to have given unreliable testimony to improve his own circumstances. You ever run across any snitches, Hank? You ever been in jail and stuff? Hank, you with me? Okay, Hank walked off.
Sorry, I was switching microphones. Yeah.
Oh, there you are.
What was the question?
You ever been in jail or anything where you had to deal with pedophiles and lying snitches?
No, I've only done like overnights for traffic stuff when I was.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's too bad you didn't, because it's a terrible thing to end up having to be in jail for a lengthy period, but it's astonishing the number of people that don't get subjected to this and they live on not realizing how deeply it is embedded in the judicial system to use liars to foment their pocketbooks. It's amazing. So we continue on. It says, here's everything you need to know about jailhouse informant testimony and how it harms our justice system. Why is jailhouse informant testimony unreliable? The use of jailhouse informant testimony in exchange for benefits like those Skalnick received creates a strong incentive for incarcerated people to lie. People may testify against a defendant with the understanding that they will later be rewarded, sometimes financially, but more typically through dismissed or reduced charges, special privileges while incarcerated, or with other forms of leniency within the criminal justice system. Because the incentive to lie is so great, jailhouse informant testimony is at risk of being unreliable. No, it is unreliable. Why is jailhouse informant testimony unreliable? Yeah, it is unreliable. That's a statement.
It's because if you look at how court cases are supposed to go, there's supposed to be a third party impartial witness. Why did O.J. Simpson not get convicted? All that evidence against him, but there was no third party impartial witness. When you have a jailhouse informant that's going to be accepting benefits and privileges for their testimony, I mean, they've been doing this for thousands of years. They would just grab homeless people around the court and pay them a couple hundred whatever to go testify. And that's why it's, said in the Old Testament, you need 2 or more witnesses. And in other places, it says that, not in the Bible, you need a third party impartial witness. How could a jailhouse informant accepting benefits and privileges for his testimony be a third house impartial witness? But does the lawyer object?
Nope. No, he does not. No, he does not. And that is why I have one of my favorite shirts. Let me pull it up here. Objection, hearsay. Objection, hearsay. You know when that judge on the bench reads out that name, Mr. Keith Little? Objection, hearsay. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, if I ever go to court, I'll definitely try it. Because they can't use hearsay. Every time the DA opens their mouth and your lawyer's not objecting, your lawyer's screwing you over every single time he doesn't object for the record. Because it's not about the first court. The first court's kangaroo court. Article 1, as they say. The second court, the appellate court, is the one that everybody should be worried about. And if your lawyer doesn't object to hearsay, your lawyer is working for the court, not for you.
Yeah, because if you don't have objections, then you don't have anything to appeal on. So we continue on. And it says, why don't more people know about the incentives jailhouse informants can receive? The jailhouse informant system is a largely secretive one, and people often lack understanding about how this incentivized system works. In some cases, jailhouse informants are not given explicit cooperation deals, so they can testify that they are not receiving any benefits in exchange for their testimony and cooperation. However, they may expect to be rewarded in the future. Benefits that are given to the informant in exchange for his or her testimony aren't always delivered until after the trial in which he or she participates as an informant, and so those benefits aren't always disclosed, explains Rebecca Brown, Innocence Project Director of Policy. This system circumvents the due process rights of the accused. How many people have been wrongly convicted as a result of unreliable jailhouse informant testimony? Jailhouse informant testimony is one of the leading contributing factors of wrongful convictions in the country. Since information about the rewards that the jailhouse informants receive isn't always recorded or easily accessible, The extent of their use can be difficult to track. But the use of unreliable jailhouse informant testimony is the leading cause of wrongful convictions in cases where the death penalty is being considered, according to a study by Northwestern University Center on Wrongful Convictions. Almost a quarter of people who have been exonerated while on death row were convicted by prosecutors who relied on a jailhouse informant. This is the part I want to most point out, is it's not necessarily the jailhouse informant. Yes, he's part of it. And that's where they like to point the finger, the snitch, the lying low-life criminal. But he's working for the prosecutors. These people, you know, the ones with 95% conviction rate, so they can go home with a nice, fat, healthy paycheck. Jailhouse informant testimony has also played a role in almost 20% of the 367 cases in which the accused was later exonerated by DNA evidence. So their 20% is out of 367 cases that actually went to court and they were exonerated. I guarantee you there's way more than 360. I would guarantee you it is over 100-fold. But again, because it's not a part of a statistical element that they can track, because everything's done underhandedly, there really isn't any knowing. More than 150 people who have been exonerated in the last 3 decades were falsely convicted in cases involving jailhouse informants, according to the National Registry of Exonerations. What can we do to reform the use of unreliable jailhouse informant testimony? I suggest you start hanging motherfuckers that are using them, like the prosecutors. I suggest you start putting the full maximum penalties on them, letting them know that their job is at hand. Their discernment is at question. A growing number of states are adopting safeguards to protect against false jailhouse witness testimony, said Brown. These safeguards include implementing pretrial hearings for judges to screen out reliable testimony and requiring prosecutors to track the use of jailhouse informants and the benefits they receive. No. You see what that's doing? It's conditioning you to believe that they should still be able to use jailhouse informants. That's not the way this system works, as Hank just described. Third party, impartial testimony. Okay? That's how you do it. You take care of the problem by getting rid of the false jailhouse informants altogether. You don't use them because they are unreliable. And you don't want to take the chance of a killer getting off because you had somebody lie on the stand for them. Measures are also being adopted to ensure the defense receives prompt and complete information about these witnesses so they can be properly cross-examined. See, I don't know how much you know about the system, Hank, but they're already supposed to be doing all of this stuff through a pre-trial investigation by the prosecutor, where he or she is supposed to do a pre-investigation of the data, of the testimony, of the elements, of the crime presented before him to make sure that all is good to go before he goes bringing up a liar on the stand, let alone one that is working for him. There's a prerequisite to this stuff, and they fail that in every case. Not just the cases where they bring in lying snitches, but in every case. They fail to do their pre-investigative search And this is evident. Because if they did, according to the law that they are supposed to follow, the defendant needs to be in a corporate capacity. End. Stop. Period.
Well, I would agree with that for Article 1 courts. They need to be in a corporate capacity. But in criminal courts where there's an actual victim, I would say that, yeah, you should be able to charge a man living off the land if he murders somebody, if he actually creates a victim, fraud, harm, injury, or loss, or anything like that.
Yes, and I agree with that. The problem is they are not running Article 3 courts for criminal transactions. You will see in rule number 2, there is one form of action. Do you know what it says, Hank?
I do not.
Rule number 2 of Federal Rules of Civil Procedure says there's one form of action: civil action. So
and that's why people say all crimes are commercial. Sorry for cutting you off.
Yes, yes. And so even in the courts where they bring murder charges, rape charges, pedophilia charges, things like that, they are still operating and conducting under a commercial capacity as if though they are suing a corporate entity. Article 1 courts. Okay? This is how they conflate the driving. Traffic infractions are non-arrestable offenses, yet they will arrest you. Why is that? Because they're not following the proper procedure from the beginning.
They don't care about procedure, and they don't have to care about procedure because they're not incentivized to care about procedure. They're incentivized to go to court, which is a gambling court. It's a courthouse casino, and see how many people you can just get to bend down and sign that plea deal, because they're bending people's will in order to accept their own slavery.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I went to a court situation out in New Hampshire once. It was a traffic court. Like I said, traffic citations are unarrestable offenses. And there were 100 people on the roll call. In the court, there were only 50 people. So when they ran through roll call, there were 50 people that got failure to appear. The other 50 people, 49 went straight to the judicial officer's window, the clerk window, and made a payment agreement. One objected to hearsay.
Do you know why I believe you? Because people like you are the last ones to go every time, no matter what.
Absolutely. They will shut down. They will take everybody else in the court. If I'm the first one they call, and I demand that there be a stenographer in that room, they will run everybody else through the court and leave me as the last one, and then wait until the very last minute when that last person walks out, attorneys and everybody, it's just me, and then bring in the stenographer. They don't want witnesses in a court where the witness is the priority element.
Isn't that something? They don't want witnesses. That's why you can't go into the courtroom and record. And we see people like auditors getting arrested for being in the courthouse where there's other offices that are public. It's because they don't want any witnesses to the slavery that's going on in there.
Yeah, and when they go into those courthouses and post offices and stuff, they have cameras pointing at them as they're pointing cameras back. How is one lawful and the other one is not?
Because the government thinks that they're sovereign citizens. Like, they literally act like sovereign citizens. You can't have a camera, but we can, when it's the same law that allows everyone, public and private, to record in public.
Yep, absolutely. And this next part is the epitome of it. When we understand who's saying this and what happens because of it, as we've already discussed, the testimony is unreliable already because they already have a bad character. Okay, so why would you rely on a bad character? Why would you rely on a wolf in sheep's clothing that shows you he's just putting on a sheep costume? You still know he's a fucking wolf, but you're going to take his word for it on behalf of the sheeple. Good job.
Well, if that's all you got, then that's all you got. A pedophile. Sorry.
No, you're fine. Yeah, and you're exactly right. If that's all you got, because you don't know how to do the damn job, you're going to go to the easiest means, the comfort and convenience of pulling up an unreliable jailhouse informant just to get the job done and not really give a fuck about the victim or its family or anybody else that you're victimizing while doing it. I would never be able to say on the stand that I believe the information he gave me was true and credible. Anecdotally, we know that in those jurisdictions employing tracking systems, prosecutors often choose not to use them since their credibility is so questionable once these factors are assessed, she explains. After decades of providing testimony as a jailhouse informant, Skalnick's luck ran out. He was arrested in 2015 for failing to register as a sex offender after he had his second sex offense abuse and convicted, and then let out early, and then failed to register as a sex offender. He also had dozens of fake IDs and other fake documents in his possession. I wonder who allowed him to obtain and maintain those fake documents. Would it be the prosecutor he was working with? Or do you suppose it was all the other criminals that knew he was a snitch and a pedophile, and they were glad to work with him? See, that's what I find profound, is the reality of this statement embedded in it by somebody that has eyes to see. Do you suppose anybody knowing Skalnick was a pedophile snitch that they would help him with fake documents? Or do you suppose they'd help turn him into the prosecutor? But this time, when Skalnick offered to provide useful information from inside jail, law enforcement turned him down. I would never be able to say on the stand that I believe the information that he gave me was true and credible. James Ferris, an investigator with the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department. Really? Aren't you one of those very investigators that allowed that man through the process to get on the stand and testify in 37 previous cases? I would never be able to say on the stand that I believe the information he gave me was true and credible. Of course, because you've never been called to the stand. So in the meantime, you believe the information he gave you was true and credible, so you gave it to the prosecutor. See, that's how it goes. The prosecutor doesn't get information from anybody but the sheriff who does the investigation. Lying fucks. Still, Skalnick has largely managed to avoid serving substantial time, despite committing crimes that could carry a life sentence. Come to find out, he passed away. He passed away without any of this being exposed about him during his lifetime. People don't talk about this while he's alive. They talk about it after he's gone. People didn't talk about it to his face while he was in jail and had to have known that he was a lying pedophile snitch. I don't understand this society. I don't understand why society allows this other than the conditioning. But even then, even the attempts on conditioning my mind haven't succeeded. I don't see how it succeeds on other people. That's the problem I have. I don't see how people are so fucking stupid to believe this kind of shit. So let's take a look at this short video. This is from Facebook.
Solicited confession from someone who barely, when he got in trouble, the first thing he did was start snitching, and he became a valuable informant in Pinellas County. And he was always there, and he was always conveniently in the right spot to hear an unsolicited confession from someone who barely knew him.
He testified in
somebody who barely knew him And again, this is another clip. This one here is on Facebook, so it damn well better be allowed according to the censor, right? They better not try to strike me down for another fucking 2020 clip that's clearly visible on another. And YouTube not being monetized, right?
In 35 cases for the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office, which is an exorbitantly high number, in my opinion.
Suddenly, Skalnick became known as
extraordinarily high, in my opinion. Yeah, damn right it is. Damn right it is.
He testified in 35 cases for the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office, which is an exorbitantly high number, in my opinion.
Suddenly, Skalnick became known as the state attorney's go-to witness.
And he wasn't just a witness for
a go-to witness for any case he wants him. All he's got to do is put him on the stand, and he'll lie for the prosecutor and convict the guy that they're trying to put in jail. And that's systemic. It is systemic throughout the entire judicial arm. Through these Article I courts, as we described earlier, there is no due process. It's all lies. It's all hearsay. The fucking name, for crying out loud, is hearsay, folks. This has been known for decades that the name is hearsay. And yet we still go up in that venue and say, yeah, that's me. So you're hearsay, huh? You yourself are hearsay.
the state's attorney's office, but there was one Pinellas County detective, John Halliday, who thought so high.
There you go. This is the guy that thinks so highly of a lying snitch pedophile because he needs a paycheck.
Highly of Paul Skalnick that he actually went to bat for him with the parole board.
Where he got out early because of this guy saying he's such a great man. A lying snitch pedophile is such a great man. I need him. He's done us great work. He's put a lot of criminals behind the bars. Fucking lying.
Detective Halliday writes to the parole board in 1984 and says, Paul Skalnick has essentially benefited the state. He's helped with information on dozens of inmates, put several people behind bars and on death row. And
let that sink in, folks.
I just want to speak up for a second if now's a good time.
Go ahead.
So the law of averages alone would tell you that it's not possible for him to get almost 35 people put behind bars and some going to death row. Because people just aren't in jail confessing to all their sins and crimes.
Absolutely. And that's why I think it's so horrendous.
Especially if they're waiting trial.
Yeah, and that's another issue. A whole new issue is the waiting trial shit. You know, that's where we have people waiting on trial for years, when they have a right to a speedy trial. Where's the?
I think the case law on this matter says. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was just saying, where is the case law on that? You know.
I think the case law says that there was a guy who was waiting for another trial to happen. So they had to wait for the first trial, see how it turned out so he could go on his trial. And he was incarcerated for 5 years, and the Supreme Court, you know, the black robe ones, they said that 5 years was a speedy trial.
Not according to the Constitution, huh?
Well, Madison versus Marbury gives them the sole ability. They're the only ones that have the ability, a unique ability to interpret the Constitution.
Oh, even though it's already been interpreted.
Right.
See, that's what your case law does. See, that's the problem with things like Pennsylvania versus Mims, in saying that, well, you get to interpret it according to police officer safety. No, you don't. No, you don't. That's an excuse. That's an excuse for hiring cupcake cowards that don't know how to be real men and use their own discernment in honor and integrity of what's fair and just right from the beginning. You're concerned about your paycheck, and you're not mature enough to understand that you, as a 22, 23, 24-year-old young man, trying to tell me as a 60-year-old man who has it well figured out what the law is, when I know you in fact haven't even studied the law, is blasphemous. Go ahead, brother.
Yeah, I kind of forgot what I was going to say, but it's something along the lines of what's going on in these courtrooms is they don't have to follow the Constitution until they get to the appellate courts. The appellate courts check the constitutionality of the judge's ruling on, or his sustained or overruled, right? But then when you get to like the higher courts, like the Supreme Court, these people are basically, how should I say it? The Supreme Court is basically making up the rules as they go, like the whole Pennsylvania versus Mims thing. So they said it's a violation of your constitutional rights, right, to ask you to get out of the car, but because of officer safety, we're going to allow it. And then the cops, you know, being given this lovely thing where they get to control where people are during a traffic stop. So the guy, let's say the scenario, guy gets pulled over. He automatically wants to get out. The cop is like, no, get back in the car. And I'm sure you've seen this happen before. Then the cop is like, no, get out of the car. And because the guy's ignorant and doesn't know that he has to get out of the car, these cops are using this to turn these people that they don't like into felons and take away their gun rights. Meanwhile, the whole time it says shall not be infringed.
Yep. And the main factor in the officer safety thing is anything that makes the officer feel uncomfortable. It doesn't have to be that they saw a gun laying in the back seat or anything like that. It could simply be a bad attitude where it puts the officer thinking, well, maybe he's going to get out of his car and assault me. Really? You think that's the norm? And that's the problem. They make it out to look like it's the norm, that's what people do. And that's the only reason they pull people over is because those people aren't normal. Sophia Daisy May says, El Perro, you gave me an example the other day on why you wear the mustache. Will you please explain it again? I use this as a simple communication that nobody has to hear or read. It simply states Hitler. And it's a reminder that this kind of shit has already happened. Did you forget? Did you forget that there are many people throughout Germany's history during World War II that annihilated the Jews, that weren't Hitler's. They were his willing executioners. Just doing my job, sir. No, you're not. You're violating my rights and claiming that your job and your authority of that job from your boss gives you an excuse to violate my rights, and therefore I have nothing I can say against it. Bullshit. I will speak every fucking day, and I will speak silently, and I will speak with my voice. I will remind you constantly that I see before me Hitler's willing executioners. And just because you don't like being called that, that's what I see. So I call them Hitler's willing executioners just by wearing a mustache. A simple reminder, not just to them, but to me. Because I have those character traits too. See, just like everybody else, I have many different character traits. It's how I pool them together and operate on that pool of character traits that determines whether I'm Hitler or Hitler's willing executioners or one of those people trying to point out all the atrocities that Hitler and his willing executioners put forth. And you obviously need the reminder because here we are. It's been written in history, not just the Jewish genocide, but many genocides throughout history. And here we are still acting out in genocidal manners, which start with the little lies. That's it.
Can I go on this lie thing just for a second?
Sure.
Yeah, the whole idea of lies, right? It's so crazy because you think like a little white lie is not going to hurt, right? But the 10 commandments that were written in stone by the Creator's finger says, do not give false testimony. And you might think, why is that in there? Like, why is that so important? So I read this book, The Gulag Archipelago by Alexander Solzhenitsyn, and he said in the book that the only way that this communist takeover was even possible was because of lies. So let me explain. It wasn't just the people that were lying to false confessions because they were being tortured, which was hidden by the torturers, and they would come up with unique ways because even under communism, it's illegal to torture people. So they lied about not being tortured by omission. The torturers that were torturing them lied. The false confession was a lie. That's what a plea deal is, because usually if you get charged with a felony, you plea it down to the misdemeanor. So the plea deal itself is a lie because you're admitting something to the court that you know you didn't do. The prosecutor knows you didn't do. The judge knows you didn't do, but it frees up the court so they could process more cattle, through the system. So it's all based on the only reason we have hell on earth is because people lie. That was Alexander's claim. Thanks.
Yeah, and bearing false witness is one of the greatest fucking sins there is, because you bear false witness and you throw the whole story off. This is why we find people that live in lies. They build on those lies. They start the first lie, and then in order to not be caught in that lie, they have to develop another lie. And that's the problem. And that's why I said earlier, I don't see how people can be so fucking stupid, because to me, it is idiotic to follow a line of lies. I see one lie. I don't care to follow the rest of the lies. I'm just going to point my finger and let you know I see a liar. Would you care to correct yourself? If not, then I guess we really don't have that much in common. Have a good day. I don't put up with lies. Even with my parents, when they stood there, and I'm 48, 49 years old, and she says, Keith, the police are your authority. It just knocked me off my feet. I didn't understand how she could believe in her 70s that she thought the police was her authority, because that's what she was telling me. If she thinks that the police are my authority and not hers, then something's wrong. So when she told me the police are my authority, she had to have believed that the police were her authority too. Had I known that my entire life growing up, I'd have told her back then to fuck off. I know who my authority is. Aren't you one of the ones that raised me in the church to show me who my authority was? And now you're telling me it's some goofy dude younger than me that doesn't know the law, probably hasn't read scripture, and somehow because he's got a shiny badge, he's my authority? See, I don't understand that stupidity. And I love my mother with all of my heart. But she is truly a stupid woman.
Well, I gotta respond to that because your mother lived through a time where they wouldn't just take you in and lock you up if you were saying things that disagreed with the quote unquote norm. President Kennedy's little sister got lobotomized, and she was never the same after that. So they would stick an ice pick in your frontal lobes through your eye socket to reset your brain. And that's what your mother lived through. So from her point of view, might makes right only because she probably witnessed her neighbors getting snatched up off the streets and coming home 3 months later after they learned to walk and talk and proprioception all over again. And then she saw, like, wow, they really messed this guy up. Like, he's never going to be the same. So I would say have a little grace for the King of Rohan, because it wasn't his fault that he was put under the spell.
Oh, I do. And that's why I still admit that I love my mother. Because if it was anything else, I'd have to say I can't love you because you did it on purpose. But it's because I know of the indoctrination. I know I was a fucking fool once. I too was a bitch ass slave. I too was indoctrinated to a certain extent. But there comes a point that somewhere in your heart, and I believe this firmly, that somewhere in everybody's heart, when you recognize certain lies, you say to yourself, there's something wrong with that. I should do something. Why is it you don't do anything?
Fear, cowardice, because everybody knows right from wrong. The thing about the statists believe that wrong can be right if it's done by the right person. You know, if I were to jump on a teenager and start punching them, everybody would say that's child abuse. But if a cop does it, it's perfectly normal. In fact, once you get, the complaint in, you're going to find out that the police station actually condones child abuse. They just don't call it child abuse because it's easier to doublespeak and say that, well, they were resisting arrest.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's, part of the problem is the indoctrination to think that those kind of things are okay. They're normal. They happen. As long as it doesn't happen to you, you're okay. No, I can't see that I'm okay when my neighbor is molesting children, when my other neighbor is abusing his wife. I'm not okay. I'm a man with honor and integrity. And I think that we need to start learning how to treat each other with that decency that scripture says about owing no man anything but to love one another. For to love one another is to fulfill the law. And when we get so consumed and distracted by this popularity contest, and we're willing to put up with the little lies that then transfer onto us and say that we're the king of the prom, that little lie that we're a king, when we've actually been indoctrinated, is a major factor in how this is all fomented. Everybody looks up to the prosecutor as a good, upstanding man. Oh yeah, he was king of the prom. He was the high school quarterback, and this and that, and he's done such a great job. Really? That's what you hold for integrity? Is those kind of things that play into a popularity contest rather than what he did with honor and integrity? They foment that's honor and integrity. I can go put on a robe and a clown and a crown and look like I have integrity. I can go put on a hat that looks like a pope and a robe that looks like a pope and look like I have integrity. But the reality is, I'm not. I'm just like everybody else. And I have concerns, like I said earlier, about my own characters. I have to do some reflection, and I have to make sure that when I put this kind of stuff out, I'm not being narcissistic. I have to be able to admit that I am a fucking slave. I am a fucking fool. I do make mistakes. So if you do find something in error, please let me know. I'm an open-minded person, and I'm willing to further discuss it. But these other people don't. I've got a 99% conviction rate. How could you possibly think I'm wrong? Because I know the lying snitches that you use. I know the tactics. I know your job. I know you don't do the pre-trial investigation like you're supposed to. Because if you did, you'd say, oops, I guess I can't bring it in this Article 1 court. He's not actually a corporation. So anyway, my apologies for the stream getting interrupted and having the video portion nixed. I will work on trying to get that back. I thought they were going to let us continue. They did let us continue for a few minutes and then cut the stream again, but then allowed me to come right back up. So they know there's something there, because otherwise they'd have just struck my channel and I wouldn't be doing streams for a week. So appreciate you coming up. Sorry it kind of went askew, but I think I got my point across that we really need to stop lying. We really need to stop depending upon the system being what it is and fomenting that it's doing such a great job. 99% conviction rate doesn't mean that they're doing a good job. It just means that they got 99% of people that they wanted to put in jail, despite the fact that many of them don't belong there. That's the issue. What do you think, Hank? we're going to shut her down, but I always like to give people their final words and state their opinions. And
yeah, it's very unfortunate that they're using the exception to slavery in the 13th Amendment to put people that don't belong into slavery or privately owned prisons, or however you want to word it nicely so you can sleep at night. But it is what it is regardless. Once they take all your rights away, they better have a real good reason to do it, and not because you broke some code somewhere that some lawyer, wrote down on a piece of paper, that some law enforcement enforced without thinking twice because he's just doing what he's told, like you said earlier. And all this stuff without a victim. If there's a victim, it's a different story. But without harm, injury, or loss to your fellow man, woman, or child, I really don't know what the fuck they're doing in there. Thanks.
Yep. And that's why I try to point it out. I've got 93 cases under my belt. I do know what they're doing in there. It's a matter of having the experience and the eyes to see, the ears to hear. But more importantly, it's the aspect of doing your research, getting into the details and not just letting it fly by as if though it really doesn't matter, because so many things matter today that you don't realize. And the first imperative that I'm going to put out there, that I put out many times, is concise English. Unlearn what they've taught you. Get back to the language and understand what they're actually saying as they convert the language for their use. So think about this stuff. Thanks, Hank. Everybody hit that like, share, and subscribe. And there's a PayPal link down there for anybody who wants to share some love. All is appreciated. And we are done with the shit show for tonight. Appreciate everybody.
It's a shit show, but it's a hit, yo. Panel full of talkers, all bark, no soul. Drama's on tap, spilling fast and loud. Dollar signs flashing when they rile the crowd. Super chats rolling, they pay for the beef. Truth takes a backseat, clouds the belief. It's a shit show, baby, prime time gold. Numbers climb high while the morals get sold. Turn up the heat, let the chaos flow. Ain't a doubt, truth, it's a rodeo. If the views keep coming and the cash still grow, I'll stop the circus, let the madness go. Fake tears fall and the mic gets cut. One's playing victim, the other talks tough. Receipts get dropped, now the chat's on fire. A digital bonfire built from liars. But every low blow makes the money ring, so they keep on dancing in that drama swing. It's a shit show, baby, prime time gold. Numbers climb high while the malls get sold. Turn up the heat, let the chaos flow. Ain't no doubt, truth, it's a radio. If the views keep coming and the cash still grow, I'll stop the circus, let the madness grow. There's a spotlight on the petty, and flames just clicks away. They don't care who they bury, as long as someone pays. It's a shit show, baby, but the lights still shine. Even fake crowns look good online. One big gang with a